In this video, we'll be diving into a mental disorder called Tourette syndrome, which has been prevalent and in the forefront of research in motor control. Understanding what aspects of the brain's physiology and function is important in dissecting what causes the onset of Tourette syndrome in childhood and adolescence. This video will also dive into the current research and literature into Tourette syndrome and exploring if there are any areas in need of further research to acquire more understanding about the disorder. I will be diving into the striatum and the dopamine pathways, as this has been an area which has been growing in research and could be a leading area that helps in determining the main causes of tics and other Tourette syndrome effects. Now, what is Tourette syndrome? The definition of Tourette syndrome, according to the NHS, says that it's, in quote, a condition that causes a person to make involuntary sounds and movements called tics. It was named after Georges-Gillet de la Tourette, who was a neurologist that described the symptoms of Tourette syndrome in 1885. Tourette syndrome is a neurodevelopmental disorder that normally begins during childhood or adolescence. The causes of tic syndrome is still not fully understood, but is believed to involve a combination of genetic, environmental, and neurobiological factors. The severity of Tourette syndrome varies widely among individuals. While many children see a reduction in tic severity of age, some may continue to experience tics and associated challenges into adulthood. With appropriate support and treatment, many individuals with Tourette syndrome lead fulfilling lives. Tourette syndrome falls under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as DSM-5, which lists three major types of tic disorders. Tourette syndrome, which is the most known disorder across the general public, provisional tic disorder, and persistent motor or vocal tic disorder. Tourette syndrome, described by Bloch and Lechman, stated the disorder as a childhood-onset neuropsychiatric disorder characterized by multiple motor and vocal tics, lasting at least a year in duration. These consist of sporadic movements and vocalizations with no rhythm, which is also known as tics. These tics can happen repeatedly without the person's cognitive control. These tics are not caused by other disorders such as Huntington's disease or substance abuse. These tics can also be movements such as twitching, clapping the hands, or vocalizations such as echolalia, which is the repeating last words of others, palalia, which is repeating own words, or coprolalia, which is inappropriate words. These tics can also be hidden movements such as moving their tongue. These tics can be categorized as simple or complex, as simple tics are short and can be movements such as eye blinks or vocals such as throat clearing. Complex tics are much more longer in duration and combine different movements such as clapping while shaking their head. These tics can be worsened with the effects of anxiety, exhaustion, or excitement. Now, the answers to this disorder can be found from the inner workings of the striatum and the neurotransmitters responsible for motor movements. According to Mendoza and Schultz, the striatum is an interconnected nuclei which is activated by social stimuli, but its role in social behavior is still poorly understood. The striatum, also known as the corpus striatum, is the largest structure of the subcortical in the basal ganglia. The nuclei receive glutamatogenic and dopaminogenic inputs. Lehman and Sheldon, 2022, stated that the result of dysfunctional basal ganglia pathways could be the reason for tics. They explain further that excess dopamine in the striatum is thought to excite the thalamocortical circuits, which results in producing tics. Buse et al. Investigated into the various research papers into if dopamine has a role in the development or intensity of Tourette syndrome, and found that, in quote, on the basis of results from various nuclear imaging studies, hyperfunction or imbalance of the DA, aka dopamine, system has been documented in Tourette syndrome patients. A meta-analysis by Bloch in 2014 found that the striatum in those with the disorder was reduced in size, and the caudate nucleus and putamen are smaller than those without the disorder. This reduction in the size of the striatum means less activity in this portion of the brain, which reduces motor control. A study conducted by Stern in 2000 investigated the activity in the putamen and caudate and found that this reduction could be responsible for the initiation and execution of diverse motor and vocal behaviors. Understanding how these regions of the brain affect the frequency and intensity of tics is important in further studying how these areas can be treated and aided. Wu et al. In 2025 investigated the current pathogenesis of Tourette syndrome in various recent studies and found that, in quote, the abnormality of neurotransmitters in the cortex-striatum-thalamus-cortex could be a trigger for Tourette syndrome, and that inflammation in this region could mediate the onset of Tourette syndrome. Now, in conclusion, investigating the reasons behind the onset of Tourette syndrome will help in being able to uncover the underlying causes and mechanisms behind the disorder. These understandings can help develop more effective and targeted treatments to those with the disorder. But exploring how the brain adapts and changes in those with the disorder and those without can give us new observations into what treatments and neuromodulation techniques that can help in aiding and treating those with the disorder. Many people in the world are living their daily life, so finding out why this disorder occurs in the brain can give those with little awareness about the condition the information to improve knowledge and aid in reducing social stigma and improving societal acceptance. Researching this particular disorder has given me insight into how complicated the brain's circuitry is, and that more and more research into the brain is vital to understanding how we function and how the slightest change in the brain can lead to dysfunction.